On today's video, I am going to chat all about cravings because I know they do your absolute tits in, just like they do for so many clients who start working with us. I used to be riddled with cravings years ago myself, so it's something that I not only have experience of supporting clients with, but I have experience of navigating myself. So that is what today's video is going to be all about: the science behind cravings, how to support yourself if you have cravings. And I think the first thing that's very important to remember is that it's completely normal to have cravings for delicious food, indulgent food, because let's be honest, we crave foods that are high in sugar, higher calorie, delicious foods like chocolate, crisps, sweets, pizza, cheesy chips, a sticky toffee pudding. Not many people are craving a chicken breast and broccoli. So there is nothing wrong with you if you have cravings. You are not broken. It is not really about discipline or willpower, but through some of the tips and techniques that I am going to share in this video, you are going to be able to start supporting yourself with cravings so that you feel more in control and the cravings come less over time. Before we get into it, we have a free online quiz called Understanding Your Eating Habits that you can fill in, and we will send you some personalised feedback across. So I'm going to share the link for that in the description so you can fill it in and get some feedback from us on the areas that you can focus on to support yourself with food. Now, when I struggled with cravings myself, it was when I was struggling with my relationship with food. And we often see this link where if somebody has really high cravings that feel out of control, they are also struggling with unhelpful and unhealthy eating habits and behaviours and their food relationship. So for me, it was when I was stuck in the binge restrict cycle. So I had periods of time where I would drastically restrict to try and lose lots of body fat, and that is when cravings would build up and up and up and get to the point where I wasn't able to control myself. And I would have periods of time of overeating and consuming all of the foods that I've been trying to ban myself from because cravings just felt like they were unmanageable and that there was nothing I could do about it. So if you struggle with your relationship with food as well, that could be one of the reasons that your cravings feel out of control. Occasionally now, I'm in a great place with my nutrition and my relationship with food, but I still do occasionally get cravings. It's completely normal wherever you are on your health and fitness journey. But now I've got that trust within myself and the control is back in my hands. So I can choose whether I have the food that I'm craving, but I don't always have to have the foods that I'm craving. And that is something we are going to delve into more in this video. Because so many people who come to work with us have really high cravings, high food noise, high food preoccupation, this is why I delved into the research to understand cravings more, because it's so important that we have this deeper understanding, especially when so many people come to us to work through cravings. And quite often I speak to people who think, oh, it's just about discipline, it's just about willpower, I did this diet in the past and my cravings disappeared. But what we usually see is that if people are just trying to grind harder and white knuckle their way through cravings, that can put a temporary plaster over a wound that actually doesn't resolve these things long term. So studies that we have on cravings are mixed and multidimensional. Now what that means is that there's lots of different things that can contribute to somebody struggling with cravings. There's not one set cause or one set solution. And often if people do struggle with cravings, it is a multitude of different things that are increasing the risk of them struggling. But what we do know is dietary restriction and not eating regular balanced meals is one of the main driving factors behind cravings. Because as humans, if we are told we can't eat something, whether that's us telling ourselves or diet rules telling us that we can't eat something or a certain food is bad or we have to avoid it because it's addictive and going to have a negative impact on our health, that makes our brains fixate on the very thing we're telling ourselves we can't or we shouldn't have. It makes us want it even more. It increases the novelty. It puts these certain certain foods on a pedestal and makes us feel like we can't trust ourselves and we can't control ourselves around them, and that can lead to increased cravings for the very foods that we are trying to ban ourselves from and trying to restrict. But also on the flip side, studies show us that if we always eat the foods that we're craving, if we don't ever have any self-restraint, or we always allow ourselves to eat foods that we want in the moment, then cravings come thicker and faster because we deepen the habitual response to these foods. We deepen the neural pathway, meaning that if when a craving rises, we immediately get the food that we crave, we are then solidifying how quickly that craving and the response happen. So it means that it's going to come harder and faster, and that actually increases cravings and makes us have cravings even more often. Now, this isn't me saying that banning yourself from the foods that you're craving is the answer. Quite clearly that isn't the case, because excessive dietary restriction increases cravings, but then always having the foods that we crave increases cravings as well. So as always with food and nutrition, it's balance, it's moderation, it's that middle ground of nuance, working on your relationship with food, building that trust up within yourself that is going to set you up to be able to navigate and manage cravings going forwards. There are quite a lot of myths on the internet that say if you have cravings, then it's because you're deficient in certain foods or you aren't getting enough vitamins and minerals in, but the research we have does not back that theory up. And we actually have some studies that show if people are fed a liquid diet, giving them all the vitamins and minerals and macronutrients that they need to survive, those people will still have cravings for certain foods, despite technically them getting everything in their diet that they need. Now, this shows us that cravings are so much more about a psychological response to food, a habitual response to food, a drive to eat for preferences and taste, rather than a physical drive or a physical desire, meaning that we crave certain foods. We have to remember as well that cravings and hunger are two completely different things. So hunger is a physical and mental sensation of needing to eat food, whereas a craving is often for a specific type of food. Like I said before, not many people crave chicken and broccoli. It's often more indulgent, highly palatable foods that maybe we're telling ourselves are off limits or we shouldn't be having, or maybe we've been brought up with certain foods being kept away or only bought out at certain times and for certain social occasions. When we were children, maybe we were rewarded with food. This can all increase cravings that are different to feeling physical hunger. Most people who struggle with cravings also report feeling cravings later in the day, and that again would link with the theory that cravings are more a habitual response than a physical need, because quite often during the day, if we are busy, if we aren't thinking about food as much, then cravings will be less. But on an evening, time to ourselves, that can be when cravings start to come to the surface for lots of different reasons, mental reasons, emotional reasons, because that's when we're thinking about food more. So it's interesting to see and think about when you struggle with cravings the most. I speak to so many clients who tell me that they struggle with cravings in an evening or they struggle with cravings over a weekend. Now that can be a habitual response to eating differently over a weekend, to trying to restrict Monday to Friday, and then by the time you get to a Friday, it feels unbearable and you fly into fuck it mode and overeat the whole weekend. That is a psychological craving to you feeling that weekend vibe, that weekend feeling, and you then associate that with food and overeating. Interestingly as well, studies show us that PMS cravings do not disappear once women have gone through perimenopause. So many women report feeling certain cravings as they get closer to their period, the first few days of their period, And that would mean that studies would show us once women have gone through perimenopause, these cravings disappear because women aren't then having the same hormonal fluctuations as they were when they had a menstrual cycle. But this just shows cravings can be more a conditioned response to certain feelings than actually a requirement for food. But we do know that most women who have a period do have an increased energy requirement the last week of their cycle, the first couple of days of their period, which is about 100 to 150 calories a day. It can feel so much more fucking intense than that. Hunger can be increased, cravings can be increased. So we do know that there can be an increased need for food during a woman's menstrual cycle. But like I said, the cravings don't disappear once women have gone through perimenopause and they aren't having periods anymore, which is really interesting. So researchers have found that the majority, not all, but the majority of cravings are a conditioned response. So that means they are habitual, a result of a cue or a feeling, meaning that we turn to a certain food and then that solidifies that neural pathway, how quickly we respond to that cue with a certain food. And that is what most cravings are based on. So, what can we do about cravings? The first thing that's really important to remember and to focus on is having a balanced, nourishing diet with regular meals. Because if you aren't giving your body what it needs to thrive, of course you are then going to have an increase in cravings for certain foods or for more foods. So that's really important to remember. Balanced meals, snacks if you need them, because that's a very individual thing, spread out throughout the day, including protein, carbs, fibre, and fats in each meal. And then what we want you to do, alongside your balanced meals, we need you to start building up trust within yourself around the foods that you crave. Now, I know that can feel terrifying at first, and we take our clients who struggle with this through a process where we set them up to win around indulgent foods that they feel like they can't trust themselves around. So let's say a food that you struggle to eat in moderation is chocolate. What you want to look at doing is getting your regular balanced meals in place, having a routine and a structure with that, and then allowing yourself a little bit of chocolate each day after you've had one of your balanced meals. But we set our clients up to win with this. So instead of saying to them, right, go and buy a share bag of Maltesers if that's the chocolate that they struggle with the most, buy a share bag of Maltesers and just have a few each day. That's going to feel so difficult, so tough and so challenging if most of the time that's spiraled out of control. You've ended up eating the whole bag of Maltesers to get them out of the house. We want to set you up to win. So instead of going straight to multi-packs or multi-bars, we would get clients in that situation to go and buy a small pack of Maltesers and have that a few times a week. Because what you're then doing is reducing the novelty of that food. You're taking it off the pedestal. You are proving to yourself that gradually over time, you can have these foods in smaller amounts and nothing bad happens. You're allowed to enjoy them. Because technically, you've eaten a bag of Maltesers, a small bag, you could then go to a shop and buy more chocolate. But obviously there's way less chance of that happening than if the food is in the house or you've got a bigger pack in the cupboard. And then gradually over time, when our clients have built up that trust, we move them on to share packs and larger size bars, but we set them up to win without pushing too hard too soon. I always get asked as well about how to manage cravings if you are dieting and in a fat loss phase. And I think it's important to remember what I said there, a fat loss phase. If you feel like you've been dieting your whole life and cravings feel completely out of control, that is a food relationship issue that needs addressing, because nobody should be living their life feeling like they are on a diet. If you have spent years losing 10 pounds, regaining 10 pounds, that is a food relationship issue that we need to address. So focusing on dieting as a phase, a temporary phase to get you to where you want to be, is really important and will help you manage cravings. But if you feel like you've been dieting your whole life, please reach out. It is not a way that you should live forever, and that is a food relationship issue that you need to work on. But if you're dieting and you are in a healthy place with food, you've got a healthy relationship with food, understanding that hunger is part of a dieting phase and an increase in cravings is also part of that as well. We can't get rid of these things completely because part of being in a calorie deficit is restriction in some way. Now, of course, there are healthier ways to restrict, and including the foods that you love just in smaller amounts while you are dieting will be helpful to reduce cravings, but it's not going to eliminate them completely. Even at maintenance, or even somebody who's gaining body fat is still going to have cravings, right? But knowing that part of dieting is being in a deficit, and that means an increase in hunger, a temporary increase in cravings, is important to remember from a dieting mindset perspective. But ensuring that you are working within a calorie range rather than a fixed number will help with your relationship with food while dieting. So instead of fixating on, say, 1600 calories a day, looking at a range of 1500 to 1700, it gives you a bit more flexibility. It means at certain times throughout the month, if cravings tend to be higher, you can maybe have a little bit more of the food that you crave in without things spiraling out of control. I would also look at diet breaks. So if you are going to be in a fat loss phase for a while because you do have a large amount of body fat to lose, have some breaks where you go up to maintenance for a period of time, whether that fits around a holiday or a trip away or a social occasion, because that is going to allow you a little bit of relief from the calorie deficit. It's going to mean you can practice what moderation and managing cravings at moderation actually looks like for you. And it does just mean that your diet is going to be more sustainable if you are dieting over a longer period of time. And I am going to leave you guys with a technique that we use with all of our clients who struggle with cravings, regardless of if they are dieting or if they aren't dieting. And that is called surfing the urge. Now, surfing the urge is actually a tool that was developed for alcohol and drug addiction recovery. So it's a research and a psychological tool that can be really, really powerful when people have urges or cravings for certain substances. And obviously in this situation, we are talking about food. So the really important thing to remember with surfing the urge is that we aren't judging or shaming ourselves when the urge and craving arises. We need to be able to take a step back from the craving in the moment and get curious. And that is the first stage of surfing the urge. Instead of responding immediately and going to get the food, we want to recognize the cravings there and get curious about it. Instead of spiraling into negative self-talk and saying, oh, I failed again, I'm just greedy, we want to be able to recognize that craving's there and give ourselves the chance to work on this. The second stage is thinking about how the craving feels. Is it uncomfortable? Does it feel difficult in your body? Where has that craving come from? Really thinking about the situation around being in that moment and thinking about if anything has resulted in the craving or if it's just a normal craving because food's delicious and it is normal for us to struggle with cravings at times. And I want you to imagine yourself surfing, literally like surfing a wave, the craving. So when the craving starts off, if we literally think of a pattern of a wave, it usually doesn't feel too bad or too intense, but then it builds up and up and up till we reach the peak of the craving. And at the top of the craving, at the top of the wave that we're surfing, it can feel so intense and painful and like you can't think about anything else. And in that moment, the easiest option is to give in to the craving and go and get the food. But we are practicing surfing the urge, surfing the craving. So you're gonna think about the craving as it builds up and get to this point and realize that when you get past the top of the craving, it does start to settle back down and subside. Now, some people, while they are observing the craving without judgment, go and use some form of distraction, whether that might be going and listening to some music or an audiobook, taking themselves out of the environment of where the food is. So getting outside for some fresh air, phoning a friend, getting in the shower, Doing something, especially while you are practicing this initially, to distract yourself can be really, really helpful. But knowing that this process of the wave of the craving usually takes about 20-25 minutes to subside, and the more you practice it, the easier it gets and the less the cravings will come over time. And you are also going to have the evidence that you can trust yourself in this situation. You can feel a craving, you're not judging or shaming yourself, but you've practiced enough times of managing the urge, managing the craving, surfing the urge, to know that you can do it and you don't have to give in to that craving in the moment. So you have to remember, cravings are completely normal. They happen to everybody from time to time. There's lots of different reasons that they happen, but the majority of cravings are a habitual response to a cue, a habitual response to an urge that over time we've conditioned ourselves to turn to certain foods. The answer is not cutting these foods out completely. It's working on moderation. It's working on balance. It's working on your relationship with food from a curious place instead of a judgmental place, but also practicing not giving in to cravings all the time, because then they will come less and you will feel more in control. Hopefully this video has been helpful and given you some useful tips to work on. Remember to fill in the quiz, Understanding Your Eating Habits. I've shared the link in the description. You will then get some personalised feedback from us and we can send you over some additional free resources to be able to support yourself and improve your approach to nutrition and your relationship with food. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next video.